Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons, where we talk about subclasses and concepts and take a darker turn with them, and probably from time to time share an unpopular opinion. If you like that, if you're enjoying dark and edgy characters, please like, share, subscribe. Please comment. We love to get in contact with you and see some of the great builds you've done and some of the ideas you have and some of the incredible DMs you had the fortune to be able to play with. Without further ado, let's jump into today's video. We're going to talk about One D&D. One D&D was just announced, and there have been a flood of people sharing their opinions. A lot of content creators are jumping in and sharing what they think is going to happen, what they like and what they don't. And I wanted to take my time and really formulate my own opinion and see what some of the things everyone else is talking about and try and see if that really reflected what I was thinking about it or how hopeful I am for the future. So if you have seen some of those and you have read the PDF, I encourage you to do so. Really come up with your own opinion. Sometimes I will disagree with them, and more often than not, that's pretty popular with me just in general. That being said, we're going to take this and just talk about a couple of things that I think are really important, and a lot of these topics that a lot of people have been addressing and concerned about, and try and ease some of that tension and really kind of bring forward what we think is going to be happening. The first part of the PDF is about character origins, and in particular it's talking about races right from the get-go. It talks about the changes of how they're presenting races going forward. Now, once Tasha's was introduced, it changed the concept of what race you will pick in regards to what classes you wanted to play. This really came down to the other racial abilities that your races got that really designed what kind of classes you really wanted to be. Some people really like the ability to switch ability scores around however you saw fit. Some people, and I've heard this a lot and I've played with people a lot that really did not like this, believe that it took away from the race's identity as these being predominant features with them. I'm more towards the thought process of being able to move your ability scores around, because I don't think any two people from the same race necessarily have to have the exact same components to them. It's just a more freeing way to create your character, and it gives you a lot of leeway in role playing. Now, they took the ability scores out completely, and we're going to address that later on when we talk about the backgrounds. But what people have really been drawing in about is that Dragonborns got significantly weaker. This is because their breath weapon is now an action out of its own, and you can't use it as a switch out from the attack action. Which means if you are an 11th level fighter, you can't drop 3 breath weapons in a row and do 9d10 damage in one single turn. It's a big nerf. I get it, maybe it's too strong, maybe people started to see that after Fizband, or maybe it isn't. Understand this is playtest, and we're going to round that out at the end and really give a full understanding of what that means towards the end of the video. But yes, Dragonborns, you go back to the original player's handbook of being able to use that as an action on your turn. Still, I think being able to use it at least a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus is best, but really take your time, look through the PDF before you judge anything about character classes and races in regards to that. I do like what they did with the Tiefling. They added a new group to the Tiefling, and they added Abyssal Tieflings, which I thought was really great, because now you have this great new dynamic for one of the greatest races in the game. A lot of these things you really need to take your time and read through. Not having ability scores here is really odd to me, but I do understand why they did it. One of the things I wanted to mention before moving on to the backgrounds is that they did change Elves and Dwarves a little bit. With Elves, I think it's a big change because they're now so much more similar, and the only difference is really magical abilities that they get, as opposed to having things like, Drows having magic, and Wood Elves being able to disappear in nature, and, having that extra move speed, and them having specialized weapons that they use. And now it's just you're an elf, and depending on which separation of elf you are, you gain these abilities. It kind of makes elves more cohesive as a unit and less diverse as they are. And to be fair, currently there are so many elves that you can be that are all so different and have different abilities, and it's a lot. I get it, elves are a very popular race. People love them from the beginning. In fact, I play a lot more elves than I thought I ever would. And it's all because of their really incredible races. And it's great, it's awesome, but it does kind of take away the differences between elves and makes it just one group of elves with just 3 different flavors. Which I didn't like as much as I like the original elves, but it simplifies it, it streamlines it, and makes it a little bit more easier, especially considering how many we have now. You can now have your vanilla elves, your Eladrin, your Shadar-kai, and have them be more distinct in that form, as opposed to having literally every elf be incredibly different, which I think in the end is probably going to be a little bit easier when juggling their abilities and knowing which elf does what. They also changed dwarves a little bit. Not too worried about that. Dwarves are great as they are. They just lose out some other minor abilities that I don't think really impact them as much as other people say, like their armor proficiency and things like that. I like that they get Tremor Sense. I think that's a cool ability. And I like dwarves as a whole, so I don't really see anything wrong with what they did with them. They did reduce the amount of gnomes you can have and kind of just make it gnomes, which is something great because I hate them anyway, so the less of them, the better. And that's just a personal thing. No offense to any of you gnome lovers out there. But understand, the great concept here is streamlining these classes and these races so that way they more identify as a smaller group, as opposed to having these plethora of just pages and pages of them that keep advancing and keep changing with every other edition. It makes them a little easier, and considering how many races exist in D&D, it's a great way to keep them simpler. They're probably going to go nuts with races pretty soon, and keeping everything tight-knit, a nice little bow where it's easily accessible, is something that this edition is probably going to do, because a lot of the things in D&D5E are simplified, and you can see that from looking at 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition, all the way up to here, and every 0.5 in the medium. Everything is simpler in this form than it was previously, and this has been the most popular form of D&D, and there's a reason for that, and they're probably trying to keep that going. Keep in mind that you can still use everything else previously, so don't get too hung up on these new races being so different and not what you want them to be. It's again D&D, so the rule of cool is going to override everything. Now, the real big change that I have seen has been in backgrounds, and I think it's quite a big step away from what they did previously. And I understand some of the things as to why they happened. First and foremost, they teach you how to make a background in this new form of backgrounds, which is good because a lot of the times, I don't think a lot of this is really going to work out the way people expect them to. The reason being for role-playing purposes. For min-max purposes, I think it's pretty funny that you're going to see a huge amount of farmers just changing the world. It's just something that's going to be so wild to me to see all these like druid farmers and monk farmers, or like sailor monks, because the ability scores match up to now your background as opposed to your race. And you get a feat with them. So it's wild because you can be a farmer and you get 2 to Constitution and 1 to Wisdom. I'm stuck on these farmers. I believe in the Heartland. It's just incredible to me, because I don't like ability scores being tied to backgrounds, but it makes sense. This is your profession. This is what your character has done their entire life before becoming the adventurer. This is who they are. It makes sense that these are those skills. It does. It really works out from an obscure view from the outside looking in. The reason why I think you have a feat is because all the backgrounds that they have given you, all their background abilities, have gone really under the radar. Nobody really pays too much attention to them unless you happen to be specifically in a scenario where you've built your character to use those abilities. 9 times out of 10, people pick a background just so that way they can get skill proficiencies and go forward from there. That's really the big kicker. I mean, I've taken folk hero more times than I've wanted to just so I can have a tool which I use as a poisoner's kit just so I can make poisons. I understand that not using some of the abilities that come with your background is pretty popular. It's just very rare that you have that 1 or 2 that really mean something. Like when you're a hermit and you have discovery. Like, how many times have you ever played a game where your discovery really made a huge impact, or as opposed to just having those abilities and those proficiencies mattering more? The new backgrounds give you a feat. I think that makes sense. I think it's great that it's a level 1 feat, so it's a smaller feat, or it's not something originally you're going to be gunning for. It's something that maybe you would take later, but you get this gifted to you because of your background. I think that's beautiful. I think it works so well. I think it makes sense if you're an acolyte. Being able to have spells from the new spell list for divine spells makes sense. That's what you do every day. It works out so well. Min-maxers are probably going to get a little mad that all their characters are the same exact background because the feat is too important or the ability scores are too necessary. It's going to be funny, and I feel bad for min-maxers in that regard. But that's why they gave you this great layout of how to make it. I don't think this will stand. I think enough people are going to disagree with this, and then this will end up being changed. Again, this is something we'll talk about at the end of the video when I go over playtests and how it's impacted things so far. It is wild. I cannot believe they came up with this concept to give everyone a free feat and really make your background matter. I like that your background matters. I'm a role player first, so who your character is matters more to me than what their ability scores end up being. Yeah, I love to be strong. I want that +5 as soon as possible to my modifier. But I want my character to mean something. And the way you do that, in my mind, is you start from the earliest memory of what your character is before the adventure. It starts out somewhere. Maybe you were an acolyte, maybe you were a charlatan, maybe you were just an outlander, or you're an urchin, or you were a noble, but that really should impact who your character is. And now tying it to a feat really makes it so cohesive, and it makes it feel good. I hope the feats stay. I really hope the ability scores go back to the races. Another thing that has drawn a lot of attention is critical hits. Now, in the new PDF, this is strictly to weapons and unarmed strikes. It does not state that any additional damage is added to the critical strike. In the player's handbook, it does state that if you do hit a critical, you do add additional damage that's accompanied with that original damage dice. That also gets doubled. And they mention sneak attacks specifically. Here, there is no mention of that. There is also the mention that it is a special feature for player characters. A lot of people have taken this to infer that monsters can no longer crit. A lot of people have taken this to believe spells cannot crit. It also means that smites and sneak attacks cannot crit. That is not definitively placed here. There is a little bit of vagueness as to whether or not it could be or it should be, or maybe there's going to be additional rules to it. I really hope that they do not take criticals away from monsters, because that is one of the things that makes combat scary. That's one of those things that make combat really important. And when your squishier characters get crit by a monster, that is a scary moment for the table. That is an oh no. Are they going to drop? Are they just flat out dead because it happened at level 1? That's a really important moment that I don't think should ever be taken away. It sucks to be the one who receives that crit. I get it. I've been there. But understand what that means for your combat. That is a great way for you to feel the seriousness of your actions and really gauge your learning experience and make your character learn from their mistakes. Learn to just not rush in and maybe come up with smarter strategies because they almost died. That is one of the great things that the enemy having a critical really, really means. Taking that away, I think, is a terrible idea. I get that right now spells do so much damage, it is almost impossible for straight martial classes to compete when you reach that level. AoEs, Fireball is a perfect example of this as to how big of a damage jump you get when you get that spell. Yeah, you can't do it always, and that's a good reason to keep spell slots in such a limited capacity. But a fighter won't be able to do that in a round. It just won't, you know? And it's such an incredible thing what spells do. And they do already hold such a magnitude in like attack rolls and things that they can do in game, utility wise, defensively, offensively. It does need to be balanced for martial classes to maintain their importance. I love playing Gish. I love being might and magic. It's one of the reasons why I love the warlocks so much. For fighters, for rangers, for barbarians to keep up, you need something to balance it out. I do think there is going to be a specific separate rule for spells in regards to this and what that means. I don't know what it could be, but maybe it has to do with crit fails, doubling the damage that you take from spells, and you know what? I'll take that. Maybe it has to do something with, you know, when you do roll max damage on a spell, if it has a save effect to it, maybe they have that with disadvantage. There's a couple of options here. It is scary. Being a rogue, that crit is everything to you, because it's very hard for you to fish that. It is very hard for you to get that in any other means because you have one shot to get it. I don't want to see that taken away from rogues. I do want to see it balanced back a little bit. It's crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong. This sucks for pallies because you'll never get that crit smite if this stands the way it is. But it does mean that there's a plausible reason for you to use your paladin spells. It's going to ruin min-maxers. If you're a min-maxer, yeah, you're going to hate this. You're absolutely going to hate this. But if you take a step back and think about some of the other classes that don't normally get played, this boosts them up a little bit. This kind of bridges the gap, maybe. But it's something that we have to see how it unfolds. Again, this is playtest, so we can see what happens and what changes. I do believe rogues should get this back. Absolutely. They just don't have enough to them offensively without that. You know, without sneak attack alone, they now face just doing what? One attack per round? It makes sense to let them keep that, because having that critical sneak attack really makes them that incredible rogue. Because when have you ever been down and like it was not going to happen? You were going to TPK and then that rogue got that one crit and just saved everyone's life. That's what rogues are in stories, you know, and you really remove that a lot from them. I don't know. I don't think it should work like that. But I do think it does broaden some things. Yeah, Pallies, you're not going to be as strong. It's just not going to happen if this works that way. You're going to see those crits fly in and you're just going to go, whatever, I'll put a smite into it, I guess. But you're really going to start worrying about your spells, and then that has a bigger impact into your character. Now you're a holy warrior. And I think that really broadens what you can do. And I think it's worth being looked at and not being so furiously hated towards, and give some of these other characters a chance to grow up in power and be worth more. Lastly, you gain a new spell list. The way it's worked out is very interesting. You have 3 tiers to choose from. You have Arcane, Divine, and Primal. And I like the way this is broken down simply because it's interesting to see how this affects subclasses. Your cleric domains, your warlocks, your sorcerers, your wizards, paladins, the other spells they gravitate from, or at least give you even the option to choose from, is going to greatly change your character. Because think about it, a warlock is going to get some arcane spells, absolutely, but your deities have divinity to them, so you get to choose some from that spell list, maybe? If you're a more primordial essence, like maybe you're a fathomless warlock, maybe you gain access to the primal spell list. That changes a lot of things. It gives you a lot of great chances to customize your character and really pick spells that really just gravitate toward them and become that special move to them, as opposed to just another thing on a spell list. I like this because this gives sorcerers a bigger range of things to choose from, and I love sorcerers. It makes clerics, their domains, that much more important because you can pick and choose maybe. It gives you a little bit of options to do so. And considering your backgrounds, some of your backgrounds give you Magic Initiate to choose from these different spell lists. That's cool. I think that's a great way to make your spells feel more understanding of what it is from the lore. The way the lore is kind of written is whenever you learn a new spell, it's like casting a net into the void and just seeing what comes back, and that's just how you know it. This really fits that in a way that makes sense. Obviously, wizards and sorcerers are going to come from the arcane, and druids are going to come from primal, and clerics, paladins, all that stuff is going to come from divine. But where do bards get their spells? Is it a mixture of everything? Is there not divinity in the music being played? Is there not this primal essence in the rhythm? Are they not arcane casters at heart? A lot of these things can do real cool things and give them a barrage of things to choose from and really make spellcasters feel almost different every playthrough if you have that kind of ability to pick them and choose them and not solely base it on your subclass. Again, this is another concept that they're really simplifying things for. I like this idea. I think it'll work really well as opposed to going, well, why isn't this on the spell list, or this should be on the spell list? Well, can I just pull this over anyway? Can sorcerers cast Call Lightning? It's a great way to alleviate a lot of that stress and make things just simpler and more streamlined. And again, that's something that they really are pushing for. It's something I'll see a lot in this whole PDF and what they're expecting to going forward. One of the other things that was announced with the One D&D is the virtual tabletop experience that they're working on to build. It looks incredible. It does look great, and it seems like it's going to have a lot of features available to help DMs that are really just not capable of dedicating and pouring hours into a campaign and making it easier. They call them lazy DMs. I just don't want to call them lazy because I know how much work you guys put into this stuff, and I know how much effort it takes just to come up with a story, and I know how much difficulty is involved with players like me that just keep doing horrible things. And I thank you, DMs, and I want to make sure to get out there that I love you guys, and that if you know a DM, give them a hug because they have a tough time, and it's rough for them almost always, but we try so hard to bring them joy when we can. That being said, there have been a lot of things that people have been worried about. Oh, this is going to ruin everything for other tabletops, and no one's going to expect anyone to do anything less than this. And it says there's such a high production value for everything, and how are we supposed to compete? And if we're not going to do that, like what's going to happen to Theater of the Mind? Everyone's expecting this full AAA video game when you play in D&D, and let me tell you, I can see why some purists might have that feeling, because it's changing something, and we all have to face the fact that we either change with the times or we get left behind. Understand, not every game needs to have incredible motion graphics for everything. Not every game has to be absolutely perfectly coded. Some of the best games I've ever played have had a great mixture of just, I didn't have time to build that map, so we're just going to do this Theater of the Mind. It's a great mixture. I really encourage a lot of DMs out there that if you're in a town, if you're just walking around, don't make a map. Just make a party screen. I'm in a game right now with a DM that does this constantly, and it works, and it feels good. And it really lets us get into our characters and really just play that out, just as our characters in this setting. If it doesn't have to be combat, it can be just a picture of the team. It's very simple. You know your players, you know who you're working with, and if you're having trouble keeping up with maps and keeping up with this and coming up with all these great concepts, and you're worried that this new setting is going to force you into that and pigeonhole you into making that, don't use it. There's going to be simplified versions of it that you can keep very simple and just very easy, so that way you don't have to worry too much about stuff like that. The game is great because of who you play it with, not because of the hours you pour in coding. Remember that. You're awesome as DMs because you give us this great opportunity to play. and to be something we're not. Like, I have a day job, and I'm very fortunate to be in a very good family and with kids that I love and a job that I really do enjoy. But this, like, when I play, that's my hours to just be, like, I can turn everything else off, and I can no longer have to worry about my day job and the constant machinations that I have to deal with, and just be a sorcerer and just try to make some change. And all of that is possible because of what DMs give us and how great you are for everything you do. If you do not want to do that, don't. There is always going to be people teeming to see what kind of creative things you do with just theater of the mind, or whatever little effort you do put in that you're capable of putting in. It's a world that we all live in. If you can't understand that people are busy, you're really in the wrong place. And this community is great, and this community is loving and understanding and embracing and cares. Play your game. Don't worry about the expectations that might be coming forward. Yeah, everything looks dope, and some people are going to be able to go, you know what, I'm just going to plan this out for hours and create all these minis and customize every single monster, and it's going to be awesome. But it's going to be no more fun than the one you play with your friends. It's never going to be a thing of you're not good enough or you didn't put much effort into it. The joy comes from all of us together, working together to have a great time. And DMs, a huge amount of responsibility comes onto your shoulders for managing the party and making sure we have a story to at least pull ourselves to. And I get it. And you do so much. And anyone else that's going to tell you that you need to do something, that you're not good enough if you don't do it, if players are expecting that from you, those are not the players for you. But the players for you are out there. Theater of the mind is not going to go away. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And if you think so, take a good look at Critical Role. Because Critical Role is one of the biggest reasons why we have D&D where it is today. And look at how much theater of the mind is involved. There are episodes where combat doesn't happen, and it's all theater of the mind. Yeah, they're all actors, and they spend so much time reading scripts that probably heavily influence how they design their campaign and the way they describe it and what they're looking at doing. But it's theater of the mind. It has just combat maths. If you want to replicate something, you can do that. It doesn't have to be super complicated. I've played in games where combat maps were just drawn out on graph paper, and they were fun. You know why they were fun? Because the party was fun. Because the stories we made together were fun. You do not ever need to meet a certain level of expectation besides your own. And if it's not for you, you owe it to yourself to say, I'm out. I'm using something else. And there'll be people everywhere in every facet looking for you, looking to welcome you in. Don't worry about that. It's a crazy thing to be fearful of. You do not need to do anything else but be who you are, and you will succeed. That's what D&D is about. This brings us to playtest. Now, playtest is Wizards of the Coast's version of beta gaming or beta access. This is when you play the game and try and see if you like it, what you don't like, and really report that information back to them. The best representation of how Wizards of the Coast handles this information is the College of Strixhaven Unearthed Arcana. They canceled that. There was a bunch of subclasses that were tied to different classes. So the College of Wither Bloom was Druids and Warlocks, and you can be either one and still pick this college and then use all of the subclass features in tandem to whatever you gain from being a Druid or a Wizard. And they had different groups for each one, and it had a very unique feel as a subclass, but it deviated from what the original classes were, and it made them feel not cohesive and not tied to the classes the way people had liked. I thought it was great, but the majority of people didn't. So they saw that and they're like, you know what, this is just the wrong direction. So they axed it and they canceled all of those subclasses, and they're just homebrew and Unearthed Arcana that's just floating off in the world right now. Play. Try it and report it back. Try a couple of one-shots when your GM, your regular GM, just needs a moment to break, or they just need time, or they can't make the session. pull it together real quick and just run it with these rules. See if it changes anything. See if it makes it harder or different or just fun or isn't. The point is, tell them. They will listen and they will change things. I think a lot of this stuff is just not going to fly. I don't think it's going to make it very far. I do like races having the ability to have ability scores tied to them. I love that backgrounds give you a feat that isn't game breaking, but it does add something to your character that really makes them feel important. I do like the idea if it doesn't change how it really ruins the day, because all paladins come from the gladiator arena. Like, it's just crazy to me, and I think that's going to happen a lot. And I love you min-maxers. I really do. I'm sorry I'm always at odds with you, but that is just one thing I think is just great. But again, I want the ability scores back in the races. I don't care where they go. I don't care where you put them. I don't think 2 tieflings can be the same. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a tiefling that does nothing but pump iron all day, and one that's just nothing but study, and I get that, and it should reflect that. And it gives you a great way to put these classes in places they don't normally belong. And that's what I like. I like being something in a place that I don't normally belong. Play it. Try it. A lot of these things are just a balancing issue. It's hard to balance correctly when so many things are just generated by dice and probability. Give it a shot. I think some of these things are going to change. I think this is just a small idea of how they're going to produce the other things going forward. I think we're going to see more things coming down the pipe. I think we're going to see what happens when a sneak attack, a smite, or a spell rolls a 20 and what that means, and hopefully it means something cool. I can do with it not doing max double the dice damage, but producing another effect, like a lingering magical amplification effect, like something like that would be great, and I would take that in a heartbeat. But give it a shot, and don't be tied down by this fear and this hatred. Yeah, some of the things are not great. I will wholeheartedly admit that. There's a lot of people that are going to see that crit and just be like, you know what, this is just wrong, and they're going to fight it tooth and nail. Fight it. Also remember, you don't have to follow these rules this way. You do have the option to play it how you want, and that's always encouraged. One D&D. What it's going to end up being when it finally releases is going to be a game changer. It's going to evolve the game system a couple of ways. We have to be ready for that, and we have to be open-minded, because some things we will enjoy and some things we will not. Everything is backwards compatible. A lot of this just has to do with regular character creation and picking your spells and how your subclasses will work. So if you don't like it, double back. Go back to the Player's Handbook. Go back to those other books. As D&D evolves, each book changes a little bit of what's available to you, and it comes up with great concepts. Not all of them are knock it out of the park great. A lot of people did not like College of Strixhaven. A lot of people right now do not like Spelljammer. A lot of people will tell you that these books are not great and whatever. What's great is that it keeps giving you options to do things. It gives you classes, subclasses, it gives you races, it gives you great ways to come up with ideas to tell whatever stories you want. And if you don't know what kind of stories you want, they have a lot of great modules to bring you to tell those kinds of stories, so you have things that are exciting and great. Don't fear what isn't concrete when you currently have a company that listens. These changes can be made. They just need to hear it. They just need to know, you know what, we're making a big mistake and we shouldn't do this. And they'll listen. They've listened in the past, and this whole thing works because we work together to play something we love, and they know that, and they know how important the game is. Maybe they're going to play it themselves and go, wow, did we screw this up? Or maybe there's something in there that we haven't seen yet. Maybe I can stop not liking barbarians because maybe they'll seem to do more because everything else got brought down to a level. Maybe there's a reason for all of this, and the only way to know it is to actually give it a try and play it. And then when you realize that you were right in the first place and you shouldn't have wasted your time, go to them and start sending those messages that this is not right, this is not what we want, this is not fun, this doesn't seem exciting, this takes away the meaning of what this ability did, or what these spells did, or why they were so important. And they'll listen. At least that's the hope. And if we can get that to happen, great. If we can't, we're just rock 5e until we see something great. It doesn't have to change into something bad. And it isn't something bad until it's officially something bad. Fight for it. Or enjoy it. It's a game. Play it with your friends. Remember that. Don't get caught up in like, I need to do this, I need to do that, everything needs to be this. Because that's not who you are. And you shouldn't be turning into that just to have fun. With that, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you sat through this whole thing, thank you so much. And if you're a DM, thank you for everything you do. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.